This next question is for JL. It's about infrastructure spending. Do you propose that spending money on infrastructure will alleviate our economy, or will it just put off our problems by adding to the debt? On what infrastructure programs would you spend our money?
Our money, that's a situation right there. We, as a country, don't have any money. So if we're talking about taxing future generations to pay for new roads, to pay for new bridges, to improve the rail systems, I mean, that's common sense. We have to do it. But then there's the bloated plans, the bloated contractors, the corruption involved with making those deals with Congress, playing favorites with that crony capitalism. So there's a fine line. You know, we can do it right, we can do it wrong, we can just throw money at it hoping it is fixed, or you know, we can lay down the law, the plan. There's no favoritism, there is no Halliburtons, there's you know, open bids on all projects, and we really could use that infrastructure repair right about now.
Okay.
And yes, it would help the economy. It would help. It would help provide for future generations, because as we're going, in most states, the roads are, even the interstate highways are in pretty bad shape.
Okay, Andre, do you want to speak to that? You have a minute.
I believe it would help only if we could decrease the tax rate or the tax burden on the people. Listen, we're already taxed at over 45% really per person. If you're looking at your state, your federal, and income tax, all of these things roll together, you're paying a lot of taxes. And the problem is, if we start to say, okay, we want to now pay money to have our infrastructure upgraded, that's going to be a higher tax burden, more of a tax burden on the people. We can't afford it right now. Even if we push it off to our future generations, which I think is a travesty to do, that's going to be more than they can bear, than they can burden, because they've already got so much of our debt laying on them in the future right now. I don't think it's going to help our economy. I think it's going to degrade our economy even more.
Harry, do you want to speak to that?
Well, infrastructure is critical, but it doesn't create direct wealth, for example, like creating energy. That's direct wealth that you get back immediately when you're in. So all infrastructure isn't the same. Now, the fact is, we cannot be competitive in an international marketplace with an antiquated infrastructure. But that's not the core. That doesn't create the direct wealth like Iran sells oil. Saudi Arabia sells oil. That's where they get their wealth to do things. China sells its cheap labor, and that's where they get the money to do things. We're right now in a situation where we don't have inexpensive labor. Our people are not well educated. It's why every smartphone in the United States is made in China and not here.
Okay, as far as the infrastructure investment, it's one of those pay me now or pay me later ordeals. It's pay a little now or pay a whole lot more later. I would not add to the tax burden. I would make sure that the costs were down and absorbed into the current tax system, which really should be a variation of what the Fair Tax SB 25 states, although I have some issues with that particular tax, you know, discussing with the Fair Tax people.
Okay, we'll talk about taxes, but we'll move on to the next question. Andre, this one's about alternative energy spending. How do you propose our government be involved in funding alternative energy? What other funding sources could there be in kickstarting an alternative energy program?
Well, again, like I said, and this is very hard for me when we're talking about these certain sectors, because my solution is an all-encompassing solution. And in putting these things out there, we're breaking it apart. But the fundamental goal at hand is to provide resources to the private sector and the incentive to go out and develop this technology. I have no problem with government assisting, but we have to give them incentive to do it in the private sector. That's where a lot of the jobs are going to be created. And in doing so, if you have a higher rate of job growth, more people working, there's going to be more tax dollars coming in. And you're going to have a higher profit. Those businesses, when I said that we want to talk about lowering the corporate tax rate to 12% and then 9% if they're going to pay health care premiums for their employees, then you're looking at a greater level of capital that they're pulling in their profits, which can be turned towards that energy or that alternative energy development. And that's where that money can come from. The government does not have to subsidize, nor does it have to provide funding for that. That should come from the private sector. I don't believe that the government or the taxpayer dollars should be utilized for that sort of development.
Okay, Harry, do you want to speak to that for 1 minute?
Well, yes, I would just say that as long as you've got the government in a position where it can't make money, because apparently if you make money, you want to give it to the private sector. But the government's what's broke. We're deep in debt. Soon we're not going to even be able to pay the interest on the debt. And the healthcare system is alone bankrupting the country. So I'm proposing that we get the government in a business that's going to create trillions of dollars of new wealth every year for our citizens. And then and only then can you talk about lowering the tax rate. Because if you believe in the balanced budget amendment, we would have to increase everyone's taxes right now if we were going to even get close to paying what we're spending. Now, well, I think we need to get real. If we're not going to, I believe in a balanced budget amendment. I've watched the Congress in both political parties run our deficit up every year ever since I've been alive. They don't know how to be responsible. I do. I would insist on getting that balanced budget amendment process underway. Okay. But more importantly, I want to get our government into the wind hydrogen business because it will create great wealth for our people.
Okay.
And we've got governments involved in gambling, and that's okay. Lotteries and stuff. Why not making a pollution-free fuel and food that we can export worldwide forever?
So we're talking about alternative energy spending. How do you propose our government be involved in funding alternative energy? What other funding sources could there be in kickstarting an alternative energy program? And JL, you have 1 minute.
1 minute, that's good. Now, to be realistic, the government, our current government, will not allow alternative energy because they cannot tax the energy. You know, we're taxed on every form of energy from the employees to the delivery to the road taxes to the power at our house to the fuel pump, and there's no way they're going to let that huge cash cow go down the drain. There's no way it's going to happen. And like I said, I'm frontline right there knowing that they will not allow it.
So what are you saying, that the alternative energy would not be lucrative enough for our government?
They won't allow it. It would hurt the government because they make their money from the taxes. Now, as Harry was saying, the government could prosper from the hydrogen. I don't know if they could prosper enough unless they jack that price up so much that all of us Americans go broke just paying our energy bills.
Okay.
We've got to change the monetary system. We need to get the usury out of the Federal Reserve, get the Federal Reserve out of America, and go to a U.S. dollar.
Andre, we're talking about alternative energy.
Yep. I'm going to be very clear, very quick. Listen, guys, I understand what you're saying, Harry, but the problem is our government should not be a for-profit organization. That is not what that government is for. John, you're right. The Fed should not be for-profit. As I've said so many times to too many groups before, the Fed has got to be captured. It has to be converted to a nonprofit. All of its assets need to be seized, converted, and it needs to be accountable to the people. That's the first thing. Number two, hydrogen, that's great. Developing the alternative energy is not going to be profitable until we make the government cut down on its spending. And if we're funding all of that energy development, we're not going to cut the government spending. We're going to increase it, and the government is going to keep
Harry,
piling onto our
let's
national
you
debt.
have at it on the government funding alternative energy.
This is my field. And I just want to say, when you mention alternative energy, that's code words for me that you really don't know much about this field, because it means nothing. That could be ethanol, ethanol, propane. There are so many alternatives, and we do not have enough money to develop them all. You need to focus our resources and our talent on the one resource that is pollution-free, number one. It's not enough, just because you're making ethanol from corn, that's an alternative energy, but that doesn't solve our pollution problems. It doesn't solve any of our problems. It erodes the soil 18 times faster or 50 times faster than it can recover. It's just making our problems worse. You have to know what alternative energy to focus on. And the reason I mentioned the hydrogen energy system is that is the only one that can displace all oil, all coal, and all fossil and nuclear fuels used worldwide ever. No other alternative fuel can do that, period.
Harry.
So, once you know what the solution is, that's where you need to focus. Don't waste time on things that don't work.